Hello, I am Payal Patnaik, and I will be speaking tonight about how you can use mapping to measure social change. Maps are the beholder's interpretation of the environment. Behind me are two artists' representation of Baltimore. If you and I imagine what a map of Baltimore could look like, it would be very different from these examples. When we tell the story of Baltimore, however we tell it, we often describe it in terms of its turning points. Behind me is such an example. The end of Bethlehem Steel's prime often represents the end of the city's golden era. Patterns of change emerged. We saw a demographic movement, mass migration out of the city, and Baltimore was plunged into a time of dearth, which was most famously featured in The Wire. In recent years, we've been noting a resurgence in the energy of the city and recognize we may be in the midst of a cultural renaissance. But how can we actually measure this? How can we understand the context of changes, of growth and improvement in Baltimore? And, well, we can start by looking at the social factors. The social issues that we talk about in Baltimore, education, recidivism rates, food accessibility, are all products of their environment. The Baltimore Sun actually released a series of maps that are playing behind me where they directly correlated neighborhood median income to mortality rate, where people with lower median incomes had a lower life expectancy. With the expansion of open data, we can start investigating these community problems. So, why maps? As you can see behind me, one thing is not like the others, and that's because you can look at a map and you can immediately understand the problem space. Although we have access to a lot of open data, maps are a beautiful way to understand our environment and be able to start telling stories about the patterns of change in the city. The Baltimore City Police Department extensively uses maps and data, which is open to the public. They release homicide rates or instances of homicides across the city, different types of crime, and from these maps we can start understanding our city, the danger zones and the safety zones and how it all plays out across the city. If I were to tell you that crime decreased by 4.5% between 2000 and 2009, how would you begin to start understanding that? The more contextual question to ask is, how has crime actually changed in the city between 2000 and 2009? From looking at a map, which will soon play behind me, we can start to make more meaningful assessments. We can start looking at which areas had more effective strategy, which police departments were implementing different types of programs, which factors were actually responsible for the successes and failures of the police department. We can start to understand change and more easily identify the causes of such change that we see around us. So, let's consider another problem that Baltimoreans face: food accessibility. Almost 1/5 of Baltimore is in a food desert. The city has started and endorsed many programs. So, one way to start looking at this is the map that I actually really like and think is the best map, was released by the Food Policy Initiative. It's gonna come up right there. And I really like this map because what they do is they take the problem space of food deserts and they map supermarkets, farmers markets, all the different types of programs that the city is recognizing and endorsing, and we can start seeing how the initiatives are working in the context of our problem. So this is an extremely useful way to approach mapping, where you map your problem space, you create more informed solutions, and then you can measure how your solutions actually impact your problem space, which I believe is an extremely useful way for sustainable social enterprises to approach measuring their success. I use this approach with my work in the Evergreen Health Cooperative, which is a startup targeting Baltimore residents who cannot afford private health insurance, but also do not qualify for government assistance. And I use social and economic indicators from the census data to map their specific target population and delivered a map to inform their strategies, which they can now use to make sure that they're making their intended social impact. The Baltimore Neighborhood Alliance and all of these data resources are really great tools for you to start visualizing problems in Baltimore and on your own, and they're extremely accessible. It's all open data, and these are all mapping tools that you can also use that are extremely easily accessible, and even the not data savvy can totally harness the power of these new tools. And I would love to keep discussion going. All of the resources that I used for this presentation, as well as other Baltimore resources, are all listed on this Tumblr. This is my email, and I do believe that maps truly do unify a lot of those situations and problems that we've been speaking tonight. Thank you.